Does your 3-liter Audi sound like this? If so, you might have a bad PCV breather. In today's DIY, we're going to show you how to replace that and a couple of tips and tricks along the way. So if you had that same or similar sound coming from your engine bay where the breather is kind of making a hissling or loud screeching noise, it's a breather for the breather, if you will, but basically when the breather fails, it has nowhere else for it to suck air in, and so that it doesn't collapse on itself, there is a little weep hole, and that weep hole starts to suck in air once the diaphragm has collapsed, and that's what I was actually putting my thumb over because it was creating that loud screeching noise. And once I pulled my thumb off of that, it was letting air pass through there, which is actually creating a vacuum leak, which in most cases will cause a check engine light. So before you even go ahead and scan the car, it is really easy to just leave the vehicle running and put your finger over that breather, feel if there's any pressure or any vacuum coming through that. Sometimes you can even take the oil cap off, and the oil cap is extremely difficult to remove. However, the best case of diagnosis is, of course, a scan tool or the little thumb trick on the breather valve there. Once we get this off, we'll dissect the breather a little bit and show you what actually happens to them that causes them to make that noise. And there are not many tools needed, so let's get into that real quick. So, as I said, this is a super simple DIY, not many parts and not many tools needed. We're going to be installing the genuine VW Audi, actually by Hangst, breather. Which actually does come with all the hardware needed, aside from the gasket, which we'll be using the Erling gasket that will fit into the provision underneath here. Aside from that, we'll also have to transfer over the oil cap as well as the little shroud around the oil cap. We will be installing a new set of breather hoses in a separate DIY. If you'd like to see that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. As far as tools are concerned, we're only going to need a couple of small tools. We will probably want to use a small 90-degree pick or a pocket screwdriver. A lot of times these connections on the hoses are actually a little bit brittle. We'll need a 13 millimeter for the heat shield on top and a T30, which we'll be using on a drill to remove the breather, and then to reinstall the breather we'll be using a T30 on a torque wrench. That will make sure that we don't over tighten any of those fasteners, as it is a plastic housing going in an aluminum cylinder head. So now that we know what parts we're using and what tools we're working with, let's go ahead and get into it. So in order to give ourselves a little more room, we're going to go ahead and take off the heat shield. There's a couple of T30s that are kind of hidden underneath that. And just going to be a deep 13 to make some clearance on the studs that hold the engine cover on. We're actually missing one back here. So on your vehicle, you should have 4. We only have 3. Just go ahead and take the heat shield off to the side. Now we're going to use a T30 next. But first, let's go ahead and get these hoses off. I was discussing that you may want a 90-degree pick for some of these hoses, and if you look closely right here, you can see where this one's already kind of starting to break. So if we try to take this off the traditional way of just squeezing that, normally it would move both of the tangs on this clip outward, but with it disconnected like that, it may be somewhat difficult. So what you may want to do is use a small pick, and if you plan on reusing these, be very careful, kind of working both sides of that coupler. So what I was doing was kind of moving the tabs on either side. You can see how fragile this is. This gives us just enough slack. If you're not going ahead and removing all the hoses, you can stop at this point, but just be very careful when you're working around this area not to get this hose pinched. However, if you'd like to give yourself a little more room, this other connection is very difficult to get your hands around. If you have some smaller hands, you may be able to get your thumb underneath that intake manifold. I'm going to be using my pick to kind of work those connections off. While you're opening those tabs, you saw that kind of fell off. It's kind of a two-handed process, but while you're working these tabs open, you kind of rock it to one side and then go get the other one and rock that one and pull those off together. And now you can see I've successfully removed those hoses, and this fitting over here can kind of just twist, and we can get that completely out of our way. Now we've got plenty of space to get in here, and we're going to go ahead and take the T30s off around the outside of that, and then work over on the bench, transferring over the oil cap and installing the gasket on the new unit. So it's just a couple of T30s on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and clean up any residual stuff we have down here. We'll clean up whatever we can from in this area. And then we also want to make sure that the sealing surface on top, which is why I have this rag here, is nice and clean for reinstallation. And again, I'm not really sure why there was pieces of cardboard in there or whatever that may be, but certainly should not be in there. I wonder if that's part of the diaphragm itself, actually. We'll take this apart and kind of figure out, maybe finding a culprit of where that came from. So now that we've got that out of the way, we've got our sealing surface cleaned up. We have our new unit here, which does not come with the gasket installed. So we do have the new gasket here. There is a small tab on the gasket, and that tab should line up with a notch. So that's kind of a good place to start. Once you get that tab installed in there, get that kind of in there, everything else is kind of just going to fall into place, lining up all of your corners, making sure it kind of falls into the grooves. So follow that around, making sure that you don't have any pinching, binding, twisting, and making sure that it is firmly seated in there. As you tip this over and install it on the engine, keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't fall out, but it should be pretty firmly seated in this breather assembly. That being said, please do not install this with any type of sealant or any type of RTV. It is not necessary. Just run your hands across that whole gasket, making sure it is firmly seated in place. And then we can simply just install this onto the engine, tightening up our fasteners. I'm going to use this by hand and just get these started. Torque all of these T30s down to 9 Newton meters. All right, now that everything's fastened up, we are going to need to disassemble the old unit just slightly, taking the oil cap as well as the little oil guard or shroud, whatever you want to call it. Go ahead and clean that up. Make sure that it doesn't transfer any of your old oil. Go ahead and hit it with some brake clean, some cleaner, whatever. Just make sure you don't get any debris in that new breather when you go to install this. There's no real way to line this up. It just kind of sits into the groove that it came out of on the old unit. And then, just like normal, go ahead and twist your oil cap into place. Now we're ready to go ahead and install our breather hoses back in place. And if you're like us and your hoses are in poor shape, this would be a great time to install the upgraded 034 Motorsport hoses. However, we'll show you a quick way to how to install these factory hoses back into place. You do want to start with the one that goes into the intake pipe here first. And if yours are a little bit dry, you may want to take a little bit of oil and put them on the O-rings. But we're going to be tipping in the side closest to the driver's side first. So you'll kind of walk that side in. Careful not to bend those hoses too far. So you'll engage it in and you'll probably hear and feel 1 click and 2 clicks. And give it a pull, give it a tug. Make sure that those are firmly engaged before moving on to this next one. And as I showed you before, this one was starting to come apart. So we're just going to loosely fit this. And you'll hear those two engage, and when we go to start the car up, you won't hear any breather whistling, and you will also not feel any vacuum drawing on that hose. So we'll start the car up real quick with the heat shield off, and I'll move the engine cover off to the side, and we'll show you exactly what I was talking about. Now that we have the car running again, you can see there's no change to the sound of the car, there's no whistling. That breather hole is no longer sucking in vacuum. That diaphragm is not damaged on this brand new one. So we've resolved this issue. There is no breather issue. There's no lean faults. We don't have a check engine light anymore until we clear it. But now let's go ahead and dissect the old one and see what failed. So this next step really only applies for this DIY video. We wanted to show you guys a little bit more than just replacing the breather and show you how they fail. So there is a series of clips along the top here, and in previous models you have been able to go ahead and dissect this and replace the diaphragm inside. However, on this model, I'm not sure if we don't offer one or there was one available, but the best course of action is to replace the entire assembly. So we're just going to go ahead and disassemble this slightly to get a better look and see what's going on. Again, this is not something you necessarily need to do. A lot of times when you're going to detent these clips, they don't want to go back and you can already hear them starting to break. But we're just taking this apart to kind of see what failed and give you guys at home a better idea of what's going on in your car. So I'm probably just going to break these because we don't need this anymore. You can see how brittle that really was. Let's see if I can get this last clip off. There we go. So there's a spring in there. And the diaphragm in the center of this, which, let me see if I can separate it. You can see that there? This little piece right here is causing all of that noise. The oil gets in there in combination with boost pressure and vacuum and starts to kind of degrade the rubber. You get lots of cracking around the edges here, and eventually the diaphragm actually tears, and where I had my finger right here is directly below this. So as the diaphragm starts to become weak, it allows air to go through the top of here, giving its own little weep hole as opposed to the normal air-oil separation. So what happens when the diaphragm cracks? You get that noise, you get a lean fault, you get a check engine light, and all because of this silly little piece of rubber or plastic here. So again, we will be having to replace the entire assembly. There's really not much to it other than the spring and the diaphragm here, but we just wanted to kind of show you exactly what was going on with this one, and it was fairly obvious when we got it apart exactly where the noise was coming from. So we'll just kind of throw this in the garbage and finish up where we left off. All right, now that you've replaced your breather, we've also started the car up, made sure that we don't have any issues, and we have no leaks, we have no noises. We're gonna go ahead and finish up the job, putting on our heat shield as well as the engine cover. And just like removal, your car should have 4, ours only has the 3. We're working on getting a replacement. I don't believe the torque spec is very much. However, obviously with us having only 3 here, one of them may have rattled off, so we are going to want to make sure they're pretty secured. Give them a couple of little craps with the impact gun, and then just like removal, we're going to make sure our grommets are present on the engine cover and go ahead lining up the oil cap. All right, now that pretty much takes care of today's DIY. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If so, hit that like button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, get into the comment section down below. And we'll have plenty more videos on this vehicle and many others like it, so don't forget to subscribe. As always, we hope you guys enjoyed today's video. We'll catch you on the next one.